Welcome to the Wolverine Digest podcast, the best spot for objective and authentic coverage of Michigan athletics. If you want open dialogue, honest opinions, and in-depth coverage of the maize and blue, this is the podcast for you. And now, here's your host, Brandon Brown, joined as always by Chris Bradler.
I was going to start by saying go blue.
Well, another show where I feel just like a tiny bit weird just blasting the fight song. So we won't. And they didn't have a game, so we're not coming off of a victory weekend per se. Obviously, Michigan's still sitting at number 2 in the country, 8-0, favored by 1 billion this weekend against Purdue. It's going to be more of the same on the field, I would assume. But I mean, dude, we were talking about it just for a couple minutes off air there. Like, you know, should we come up with all of our regular segments and do that? You know, kind of take a step back and look at all this stuff and see where everybody's at and give our opinions and our own 2 cents and just kind of walk our way through all this. So listen, everybody out there who's watching and listening, if you want to talk about Purdue or the on-field, feel free, throw it in the comments. We'll look at it. We'll go through it. We'll talk about whatever we need to. But it's like we said last week. And every time we come out with a new we come on with a new show, some more stuff has come out. Some more people have said this. Some more people have said that. Jim Harbaugh got a chance to speak a little bit today. I know he didn't say a whole hell of a lot about the ongoing investigation and because he can't. But yeah, I mean, Chris, like I just kind of outlined there, we were talking about what we were gonna address, and we kind of knew, you know, what the direction of the show would be and what people were interested in and what everybody's talking about. Yeah, right there, Matt. Any concern with Purdue? Zero concern. They're not good. And, you know, all the other stuff is kind of at the center stage right now.
Yeah, I mean, so, you know, I went to the press conference today, was eager to see, you know, how Jim Harbaugh would approach it. We've seen before earlier this year when he was going to serve the 3-game suspension to start off the year that he came out, had an extensive statement that he wanted to read through as far as, you know, what his thoughts were on the Big Ten, revenue sharing for the players. And I thought we might get something like that today, some sort of statement, not necessarily directly, you know, discussing the NCAA investigation, but maybe just kind of his position, his support from the university overall. Mm-hmm. We didn't really get that. It was pretty much right from the get-go. Not going to talk about what's going on. Let's talk about Purdue. And then, you know, the video I put out earlier today pretty much showed you how exactly that press conference went. There was nobody in the room that was interested in talking about Purdue. And I don't think we're interested in talking much about Purdue. Here's kind of where I want to start off the show. I've been pretty plugged in this week, just trying to follow everything. And I get that some people are, you know, they're over it. They think it's played out. They want to talk about some other things, which is totally understandable. As somebody who pays attention to it all day, every day, I can tell you that it's exhausting. But I think this entire ordeal with Michigan and the NCAA investigation has really proven and given validity to what many people already think about sports media, which is it's trash. It's garbage. A lot of it's bullshit. We and Brandon, you and I work in this world, so I can speak to it. Most of it is generated on what can we do to generate clicks? What are people going to be interested in? What are they going to click on? And I think that's never been more apparent than it has been this week in particular with the Michigan news that broke. And I think what I'm surprised about the most is not what you see from people that run blogs or super fans on social media or rival fans, because you're going to see, you know, anytime something like this happens, you're going to see the expected response from folks like that. But you have people that have built a relatively solid reputation in this market that, quite frankly, have been completely irresponsible with their reporting. And that includes, as much as I hate to say it, folks from Sports Illustrated, The Athletic, the Wall Street Journal. I mean, it goes on and on, the Detroit Free Press. And I'm just going to go through some of the things I've seen this week, if you'll let me go through it really quickly, Brandon.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got folks in the Michigan market. that are claiming that Jim Stapleton is at the heart of this whole thing. Jim Stapleton, obviously minority owner with the Minnesota Vikings, a Michigan alum, reportedly has beef with Jim Harbaugh, and also happens to sit on the NCAA infractions committee. They think he's the one that's leaking this information and that's trying to sabotage Jim Harbaugh. You have other folks within this market that think Ward Manuel is at the center of this whole thing. That Ward Manuel and his frosty relationship with Jim Harbaugh, he's the one leaking things, trying to get Harbaugh out of town. You have other folks that are just saying it's just alumni and wealthy donors within the market that have beef with Harbaugh. They also want to see him gone. You've got people in the Michigan market that are claiming Ryan Day is behind this and that he hired his brother's private investigative firm to go out and dig dirt, which could be true. Maybe it's not. Who knows? But this is what's being said by trusted people within the Michigan market. You've also got people, the Washington Post, reporting that an outside firm brought this evidence to the NCAA, and that's why this investigation came about. But no idea who the investigative firm was. Who brought this to the NCAA? No reporting on that. You have Stuart Mandel, editor-in-chief for The Athletic, which I thought was a pretty reputable brand out there until this last week, saying the Big Ten should consider banning Michigan from the conference championship game. Based on what? Based on what evidence so far that would lead somebody in that position to say, well, the Big Ten should consider banning Michigan from the Big Ten championship game? You have Tony Garcia of the Detroit News writing an article about the FBI being part of the investigation into Matt Weiss's computer. You know, that he got fired for the computer crimes. The FBI is involved. But about one paragraph into that article, it transitions into Connor Stallions as if the two have anything to do with one another. And he neglected to mention the fact that University of Michigan Deputy Police Chief Melissa Overton clearly stated that those two things have nothing in common. That wasn't part of the article. So that's irresponsible journalism at best. Pat Forty of Sports Illustrated, Pat Forty, put out an article, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, insinuating that the Michigan ball boys are also involved in this scandal, that they're standing on opposing sidelines, listening in, stealing signals, and doing things with their hands to send signals over to the other sideline. Sources at the school that was warned that this was happening said they didn't experience anything that would implicate the Michigan ball boys involved in such schemes. But it didn't stop them from putting the article out. The Wall Street Journal last night published an article that said Michigan had rescinded Jim Harbaugh's contract offer. Jim Harbaugh today refuted that. And so did other people who I think would know more than what the Wall Street Journal reported. I'm just about done here, but I want to keep going through this bullshit because I had to go through it, so everybody else is going to go through it as well. You've got another reporter for the Sports Illustrated Network. Is this guy? Was this the Ohio State gentleman that we had on the show? Brendan Gulick, is that his name?
That is him.
Came on the show. He recently put out an article saying that Michigan deserves the death penalty. The death penalty. And he also, in his initial statement, said, and I'm basing that not on any firsthand knowledge, but what I've read in reports online. So, lastly, today, the Detroit Free Press puts out an article that their sources said Harbaugh's lawyer, Tom Mars, was in Ann Arbor on October 13th to discuss a potential contract extension for Jim Harbaugh. Tom Mars, who is that individual?
The guy himself.
The guy himself took to social media and said, not true. I haven't been in Ann Arbor for about a year. So I say all that to say you have supposedly reputable sports journalists that are out there and organizations printing and publishing bullshit that muddies the waters, that is highly inaccurate at best, irresponsible at worst. And I don't blame Jim Harbaugh or the University of Michigan for not wanting to add to it or contribute to it by putting out any sort of statement that's going to be taken and twisted by what I think is just, I am blown away by how irresponsible the reporting has been over the last week. And that is what has led to this thing blossoming and exploding into what people are calling the biggest scandal in college football. Let's not forget what happened at Penn State. You know, we're stop trying to make this into some crazy big scandal when we already know that sign stealing takes place, and we already know that the NCAA bylaws aren't specific when it comes to what Connor Stalions was doing. I think the only thing we know for sure is that he was sending people to games to get intel. Whether or not the NCAA has enough evidence or can somehow tie that into a rule that's already existing to hand down a punishment on Michigan remains to be seen. But this bullshit about ball boys being involved and Harbaugh's lawyer being in Ann Arbor when it's not accurate, and trying to tie Matt Weiss into Connor Stalions and all of this other shit that we see, I'm beside myself by it. I'm pretty disgusted by it. And I can understand why Jim Harbaugh had no interest in speaking to the media today.
Yeah, it's I don't really know how it happens. I mean, I know, I know a little bit about, like, because look, if you do this job long enough, you're going to get fed incorrect information. It's going to happen. And I have people that I trust. If they tell me something, I don't take it as gospel, but some people will tell me some things and I feel good enough to put my name on it. Not all the time. Sometimes, depends on the topic, depends on how big of a deal it is, depends on how bad of a mistake it would be. And I know everybody kind of operates within some lines of that world when you're in the journalism world. But yeah, for something as concrete as to say, like, this man Tom Mars was in Ann Arbor and he just flat out says, like, no, I wasn't. Like, I don't know how you can get that wrong, unless maybe a Zoom call. Maybe Tom Mars technically wasn't in it. Look, these kinds of things happen. I've been told incorrect stuff before. Now, I will say, back when I was gathering information and doing a lot of digging, and it was to cover recruiting. It's not quite the same kind of level of, unearthing hard to find information as this. But I do say, I don't know how you can slap a story together, put your name on it, and claim something as outright fact when it just simply isn't. I mean, even if Tom Mars was on a Zoom call and that's how he was able to work a deal, and I'm just making up a hypothetical situation, you can't say that he was in Ann Arbor if that didn't happen. So yeah, I don't really know how that happens. I don't really know, the ball boy. I hadn't even heard that one. The ball boy? Like, what the hell?
Great. It's fun, right? That's a good one. I mean, if you really want to get some clicks and bring people into it, implicate the ball boys.
Yeah, I don't know. That's wild to me, and especially if the other school that was involved with it came out and said, like, no, that didn't happen. Like, who's putting that out there and why? And where did you get that information from? And did you not think to, like, vet your sources a little bit more? Like I said, I've been wrong before. I've been given incorrect information, and that is on the people writing the story. You have to know, like, this is my source. This is where I got the information from. This is why they know what they know, and I can trust them, and I can take what they say to the bank, or maybe not. Everybody's got somebody that they talk to. Some people are more believable than others, and you've got to know that. And with something like this, that's really only been on the waves now, for 2 weeks? Maybe not even 2 weeks.
Not even 2 weeks. No, I mean, this Thursday
will be 2 weeks. Yeah. So, for so many inaccurate stories to come out and false details and frankly just bullshit opinions, a lot of it's just been opinion based. To say that Michigan deserves the death penalty is fucking asinine. Like, this is not. Yeah, I mean, you don't want to be like, take a look at Penn State didn't get the death penalty for what went on there. Okay, like, let's pump the fucking brakes a little bit. That's crazy. And again, based on the loosely written bylaws and some of the gray areas, I'm not even sure Michigan broke any rules. So piss off with that idea, okay?
And I'll just say that I'm becoming more and more convinced that
they might not have broken any rules.
I'm and I know that this is going to be devastating news to everybody out there who's chomping at the bit to watch Michigan go down for something. The more I see come out, in terms of what's actually written in the bylaws and how it's presented, I'm not so sure that they broke any rule that's on the book. Now, sure, anybody who has any common sense whatsoever can see that Michigan was doing, I kind of look at, compare it to doing your taxes, Brandon. You try to find whatever loophole you can find so that you pay the least amount of taxes. Is it illegal? Is it not? There's some gray area, whatever. But to say that Michigan went out and blatantly broke the rules, I think that's a stretch at this point based on what I'm seeing. And I think if you're the NCAA, and I said this before, if you're going to try to hammer something for Michigan, you're going to have to try to reach pretty far or come up with a new rule that they broke that wasn't already existing on the books, just based on what I've seen so far. And overall, I think the biggest, one of the biggest tragedies, and tragedy is a pretty strong word, but I just find myself, as a fan, like I said, it's really taken a lot of the shine off the season because Michigan is 8-0. They're about to play Purdue. They, Heisman Trophy caliber quarterback, look like the favorite to win the national championship. Everything is there in front of them. And instead of being able to talk about that and write about those things, this is what we're spending our time on. And even worse than that, every accomplishment that this team has had over the last 2.5 years is now into question. When you go back and you look at how dominant the Wolverines were in 2021, it's, because they cheated. When you look at 2022 and that successful season, it's because they cheated. And everything that's happened so far, everybody's just reducing what these players have accomplished to cheating. And I think it's extremely unfortunate. And I said this on social media. The most unfortunate part about it is the damage is already done, regardless of what comes out from the NCAA investigation. And we know that's not going to happen quickly. It's going to take time. The NCAA is not an institution that moves fast. For the remainder of the season, this is a team that is going to be viewed largely as cheaters. And they're going to have to deal and operate with that cloud hanging over their head. And it's going to be interesting to see what it looks like. My hunch, my gut feeling is that, I'm sorry. I feel terribly sorry for the folks who are fans of Purdue, because I feel like this weekend is going to be bad for them. And I feel like that's going to be the case for the remainder of anybody on Michigan's schedule. This team's going to play pissed off. They know that their accomplishments are being questioned. And just like they arrived in East Lansing with the intention of making a big statement, I think that's the Michigan team we're going to see the remainder of the way.
Yeah. Couple good points here. I mean, Dan General, buddy of mine, kind of echoing what Chris is saying. Unfortunately, not Michigan people per se, not the players per se, the people, but everybody out there is going to say, that's okay. Too bad. Won the Big Ten? Yeah, but. Won the Big Ten again? Yeah, but. Beat Michigan or beat Ohio State twice? Yeah, but. That's already. Even if the NCAA comes out and says we found nothing, they are guilty of nothing, it's still going to be there with them. It's still going to hang over their heads that something was done that should not have been done. And look, I've never been one of the people to throw out everybody's doing it, so it's. I just don't really operate that way. It's okay, if you're doing something you shouldn't be doing and you shouldn't be doing it, and you know that, even if other people are doing it, you're still in the wrong. I'm not going to justify it by the fact that other people are doing it, but I have had this question in my head because I think it's impossible not to wonder. I put it in an article earlier this week, how 5 things I just am curious about with all this stuff. I just can't imagine what he was doing by sending people to these games in person being all that much more helpful than what you're perfectly allowed to do by scouting off of film, all 22 tape, in person on the sidelines of your own games. And you can go back and look at it's crazy. Again, that's why I come to where someone's saying Michigan should get the death penalty or this is the worst scandal. And it's not even close to that. It's not even close to that.
Based on what factually that you've seen so far would you come to that conclusion? And the answer is nothing. And I already pointed out in the opening how many of these reports that are out there that are just flat out inaccurate. So to come out and publish an article saying Michigan should get the death penalty, what's the evidence? I read some articles online that basically said Michigan did X, Y, and Z. That's what we're dealing with now in the sports world. And look, man, Connor Stalions, and I regret that it wasn't asked today because I wanted to ask it. It was becoming clear that Michigan was more than fine with shutting down the press conference with Harbaugh if the questions continued to go around the investigation. But I am curious what Harbaugh's take was on working with Connor Stalions. Investigation aside, what did you think about the dude? What did he bring to the team that obviously led you to want to hire the guy? And here's another point that I want to make, or a question that I have, I guess. by all accounts, Connor Stallions was a absolute workaholic. He clearly had personal ambitions that went above and beyond what most people have. 500, 600 page manifesto or blueprint in terms of how he's going to get to where he wants to get to. The question I have is, for somebody who's so meticulous, who's so specific about what they want to do, who's so good at deciphering all these signals, do you mean to tell me that he's really, really good at that stuff, but completely fucking stupid or ignorant to understanding the rules? Or did he look at the bylaws and say, there's really nothing there specifically that says I can't do this, which would make sense why you're going to put your name on some of this stuff, why it was widely known that it was happening. So the other part is, in that I want to pump the brakes on, is, Connor Stallions, and think of him what you want, but his name has certainly been dragged through the mud over the last week. He's been, when you hear the word manifesto, two things come to mind: serial killers, or, somebody who's going to blow something up or something like that. Maybe that's not the case. Maybe this was a guy who was working his ass off, who had personal ambitions beyond just being a staffer. He obviously grew up in the state of Michigan, loved the program, wanted to run the program. There's nothing wrong with somebody who has a plan to get to where they want to be. And I just have a hard time believing, if he was that meticulous, that detailed, worked that hard, that he could drop the ball so significantly on the other side, as far as not understanding what he was doing was completely against the rules. And again, what I've seen so far in the bylaws, there's nothing specifically that says what he was doing is illegal.
Yeah, it's funny that you bring Chris. I'm sure you glanced at my article that I put up. I don't know if it directed your question that you just said, but my number one question on that 5 questions I just have after trying to digest all of this is, what exactly and who exactly is Connor Stallions? What's he all about? Like you just said, ask Jim Harbaugh. Not the specifics of this whole deal, but what made him employable? What made you bring him on? What allowed you to have him around the program for the last 6-8 years or whatever it's been? And why did you decide to hire him officially last year, once he was kind of, transitioning into another part of his career? Because, dude, I've heard so many different things. Again, this goes back to what your soapbox at the beginning. Like, I've heard him described as a mastermind code breaker in the military, and I don't think that's even remotely true. I think he just figured out some stuff at the program and kind of found a niche for some way to break down film and take notes and make it usable to the staff. That, like, I've heard him described as, like, I heard it described, I can't remember where, that he was specifically targeted by Michigan for his code breaking skills. And I'm like, I don't think that's even remotely close to accurate. I don't think it's close, because he had been around the program in a volunteer basis for many years. And I'm just like, he was at the Naval Academy, but I also heard him described as like a detailed Marine. And I'm like, aren't those two different things? Like, again, I just have a lot of questions because of all the stuff that you were talking about earlier. You read something by people that, and there's been a lot. You said a few names, and that's fine. Yeah. I'll throw names out there if they need to be thrown out there. But there's been a lot of.
The only reason I threw the names on it is because they attach their names to the article.
Oh yeah, we're not.
It's not a giant secret who it is that wrote it. I feel like if you're going to put your name on something, then put your name on it.
We're not taking jabs at all. They're out there and they're saying this, and then 40 minutes later, everything they wrote was debunked, and they're called, liars or inaccurate or whatever you want to say.
By that, dude, 40 minutes on social media. Dude, that rescinded, like Harbaugh's contract was rescinded, spread like wildfire last night. Everybody was running with it. Everybody thought, uh-oh, here's the nail, here's this, here's that. And then you talk to Jim Harbaugh today and he says, no, not accurate. So
okay, so here's Jared. There's Jared Johnson right there that said that he was basically a Navy SEAL. No, he wasn't a Navy SEAL. Like it's just there's been so many things that have been thrown out there. Like Michigan found this.
I heard he took out Bin Laden. He was there. He was the one who pulled the trigger.
Like they just found this insane, highly trained operative to come in and I'm just like, no, that's not what happened. Again, so that was that was one part. I would like to know a little bit more about him, and the fact that you wanted to ask a question about that doesn't surprise me. But it may not have went well. It sounds
felt like it was going towards a place where, as the questions continued, the press conference, and maybe, you know what, who the hell cares? Because like I said, nobody was there to talk about Purdue. You know, somebody asked a question about the linebackers, and it was like you could feel the air go out. Nobody cared about, there was one topic that people wanted to talk about, and it was clear that we weren't going to get any answers about it.
My second question of the article was, who the hell has a manifesto? Which I kind of stand by that a little bit. No, to your point, it's okay. It's weird. It's weird, but like, obviously he had a point for it. He had other people on board. It was an organizational thing. Let's
also be specific about what it was. It was a live Google document.
Several hundred pages, right? 500 or 600.
And it's an ongoing thing that he's working on,
right?
According to these texts, assuming that the texts were accurate, have no reason to believe they're not. But listen, he was the one that referred to it as the Michigan Manifesto. You and I say some dumb shit all the time. It could have been just a tongue-in-cheek sort of thing.
Right.
But again, when you hear the word manifesto and you go back into your memory bank, it's like, I've only heard that a handful of times in my life, and it's never been good when I've heard that associated with somebody.
Another good question from Dan. Truth to that? No, I don't know. I haven't seen it. There were some reported text messages from
unnamed person who attended a Power 5 school back in the day, shared some text that he had with Connor Stallions, who had this grand master plan. And, that's the thing about this is everything that everybody's reporting is coming from unnamed sources and a guy who heard from a guy who heard from a guy who said X, Y, and Z. And because of that, You've got people that are calling for the death penalty, calling the Big Ten to step in and keep Michigan out of the Big Ten championship. And I just think it's, you expect that stuff from certain folks on social media, certain super fans, unnamed people on social media. You expect that. You don't expect it from The Athletic. You don't expect it from Sports Illustrated. And I think over the last week, that's been the most eye-opening aspect for me about this whole thing, is that anytime something like this happens, it is a gold mine. And there are people that are going to rush to capitalize on it in whatever way they can, regardless of whether or not what they're reporting is even factual, because somebody told them that they heard from somebody else that this was the case. To me, that's terrible reporting. I'm not a guy who ever pretends to be an insider because, quite frankly, I'm not an insider. Do I talk to players here and there? Yeah, sure, in passing, but it's never in depth. I'm never asking in-depth questions about what's going on with the program. It doesn't have anything to do with that. So these people that want to rely on these sources, I feel like you need to do some homework and you need to come with something a little more substantial than we heard from a guy who heard from a guy who thinks the ball boys might be involved. And let me say this about the ball boys. Look, God bless them. I've been up close and personal with these folks.
You hate them.
They are not part of an elaborate scheme to steal signs. That's all I'm going to say. I work the sidelines. I shoot photographs down there. I see them running around. They're very excited to go get the balls. If these guys are a part of that elaborate scheme, I'll drink a full beer out of one of Brandon's shoes.
We've had a couple discussions about the old ball boys, which is kind of funny. They tend to they get in your way all the time, right?
Their biggest, the NCAA should look into the ball boys for constantly getting in the way of my fucking shots on the celebrations. They're constantly standing in the way. They're celebrating in front of me. Every time I try to get a good picture of a touchdown celebration, I get somebody's gut or belly or ass or something because they're there to try to get the football. That's what they're guilty of. But this idea that they're also part of the scheme, this thing just got blown up into, now the Matt Weiss and the FBI thing. That's been going on for months. And to break that, to work for the Detroit News and to break that as if it's breaking news, Matt Weiss being investigated by that's been happening for a while now. And somebody who's a part of that investigation already said it has nothing to do with what's going on with Connor Stallions. So why even put those two things in the same article together? Well, the reason you do that is because it's going to generate clicks. It's going to generate attention. I don't know who this Garcia guy is, but I went and looked at his Twitter page. By far the most interaction he's had on that platform. By far. And that's by design. And I think it's unfortunate.
Yeah. And I will say this too. I'm coming up. It's wild to think about. I'm coming up on 10 years. I'm coming up on doing this for 10 years. Yeah. Different capacities, different arenas. I used to cover recruiting only, and then I kind of shifted more to, it's been some different stuff. But one thing I've learned, and I'm not going to say any names, but I'm going to say there are a lot of people in the Michigan market that have one or two sources, and that's it. And that is their golden goose gospel. And some of them are very biased. Some of them are much too close to certain situations that they should never have an opinion about. And the people that listen to them and that write articles based on what they're told by these sources treat it as gospel. And that is dangerous as well, because it's one-sided, it's biased, it's emotion-driven, it's just not healthy. It's not good to have sources like that in some of these arenas. And unfortunately, almost everything that has to come up that's got like a side or some bit of, I don't want to say scandal, but something a little bit less than just reporting the news or talking about football, it's got to do with Jim Harbaugh. And Jim Harbaugh's got friends, and some of the people in the media know those friends, and that gets a little dangerous too. So some of the stuff you're talking about where it's like you're reporting that a guy is here and he's not, like that, I don't know how that happens. But somebody asked me about Isaiah Hole. Chris and I both know him personally. I haven't talked to him. That's not something I would ever do. I saw his name in the news a little bit. I'm not even exactly sure why. I was wondering if there was a little more to that, but I haven't talked to him about it.
Part of his podcast, basically, to sum it up, had insinuated that there are people within the Michigan circles that could be driving this whole narrative, leaks, this, to try to get Jim Harbaugh out, that they would rather be right and see Jim Harbaugh removed than to have Jim Harbaugh stay and be wrong about what they think about him. So, and again, I don't want to put words in his mouth. You can go on over to, I'm sure his podcast is pretty easy to find out there, but that's what I'm saying is you have all of these different angles and all of these different suggestions and insinuations about what's going on. And when you step back and you look at it in totality, it's a complete shit show everywhere you look at it, from ball boys to lawyers being involved, to staffers being involved, to Ward Manuel being involved, to Jim Stapleton being involved, to Ryan Day and Ryan Day's brother and the investigative firm it is beyond like soap opera type shit, but people take it and they run with it. And it's ballooned into this thing has some people saying biggest scandal in college football history, death penalty. And they're basing that on seeing zero factual evidence other than the closest thing to evidence that we have right now. I think we can all say this with pretty good certainty. Connor Stallions bought a lot of tickets to some football games and sent people there. We know that. That's pretty much all we can say definitively at this point. Everything beyond that is speculation, yet people are taking and running with it as truth. Jim Harbaugh needs to be fired immediately. Michigan should be banned from participating in the Big Ten championship, and the program itself needs the death penalty. On what?
Well, back to the Isaiah thing. That's kind of interesting. I hadn't heard that, but I would be lying if
I give him credit for saying that there's an arrogance within the Michigan, within the Michigan alumni and group that, again, would prefer to be right and see things happen a certain way.
I had heard something similar. I didn't run to the waves with it. I didn't write a story on it, but I did hear, and Chris and you and I have talked about this off the air. I may have mentioned it actually, because I think I said, when we first found out, what I'm saying is I heard somebody within Michigan's program or athletic department may have been one of the leaks or one of the people providing information to whoever. If it's the NCAA or this investigative firm or Pete Thamel or Ross Dellinger or any one of these. I'm not sure.
Christ, I didn't even mention Pete Thamel or Ross Dellinger.
Yeah, they were the pioneers of this bad boy early on.
Goodness.
But I did hear
with his pictures of Connor Stallions on the sidelines, just fucking standing there working as if he's got evidence right there. There's Stallions. Yes, he was on the sidelines for all of the games. Thank you, Ross. Job.
Yeah. But I did hear that as well. So I mean, like, that might not be completely unfounded. But again, I didn't run to the waves with it. I didn't think that was responsible. but it is something that I've heard about. And I mean, who knows? I did find it very odd that less than 24 hours after this initially dropped, that they had Connor Stalions' name. I found that odd. I said the only way that happens is if somebody with direct information about this situation told somebody. There's no way they dug that up that fast. There's no way that an independent investigative firm or the NCAA found his name out of hundreds of people involved with Michigan football. Somebody gave that name to somebody. I feel pretty confident about that.
But again, this is something that, as it relates to Connor Stalions directly, something that was known about him, not just this year, but goes back last year and possibly beyond that.
Yeah.
And if you believe what was reported in the Washington Post, it was an outside firm that brought this information to the NCAA, which caused the NCAA to act. Now, the question is, who was that outside firm and who was responsible? Who was behind it all? But maybe that's how you get a name like Connor Stalions. Maybe they approached the NCAA with all that evidence. But again, at the end of the day, we don't know. We don't know who it was. We don't know what they had. And nobody knows what evidence the NCAA has right now, other than, like I said, pretty sure that Connor Stalions bought a lot of tickets. That's what we know. But to decide that a program deserves the death penalty on a rule that they may not have even broken, regardless of whether or not you like the way they went about it or Connor Stalions' methods, there's a chance that he operated within what the regulations are, found the loophole, exploited it. Not necessarily saying that that's a great thing, but it certainly doesn't lead to breaking the rules. So this rush to judgment, this rush to Jim Harbaugh's guilty, the program needs to suffer X, Y, and Z, I just think it's completely irresponsible. And again, you expect it from the dinks online who are nameless and, won't show their face, won't put their name to anything. But to see legitimate sports media outlets calling for this type of thing, I've just been blown away by it.
Yeah, there's been a lot of like I said, the five questions that I put out there. There's just been a lot of things I've thought about. And again, it goes back to, I'm not trying to dismiss. I'm not trying to say like Michigan didn't do anything wrong or they shouldn't have done this or they shouldn't have done that. But I really would love to somehow take a deep dive into how helpful or how much of an advantage a program would gain from something like this when you have someone out there throwing around the idea of the death penalty or banning a team from the Big Ten championship or banning a team from the college football playoff or taking away scholarship numbers. I'm just like, I just feel like things have been done worse than that didn't have anywhere near those kinds of penalties. Like, all right, I mean, dude, go back to 1 week ago. Michigan State knew what was going on. They changed their whole way of calling plays, and they got blasted by 50 at home, right? Yeah. TCU, apparently the only team on the planet that thought to maybe switch some stuff up. That's the only reason they won the game, right? Like, give me a break, man. This thing's been going on for 3 years, and teams reportedly knew about Connor Stalions and knew about what Michigan was doing, knew that they had the best sign-stealing organization in the history of the sport, and said, fuck it. We'll just go into it how we were going to anyway. TCU is the only program that thought to change something up. It's the only reason they got a win.
Well, I think
it's such a stupid way of thinking.
Didn't some of the coaches from Ohio State admit that they had attempted to change some of their signals going into last year's game?
If they did, then they suck at their job, and Michigan's still a better football team. Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, there are ways around it. And if you didn't do it, then that's on you. And if you did do it and it still didn't work, then like how helpful is this really anyway? And then why would you suggest such harsh penalties for it?
Yeah, and I think
I don't know.
On College Game Day, Kirk Herbstreit brought up, if I understood what he was saying correctly, I think he made a good point, which was, you send somebody to these games, they record the sidelines and the motions that they're making, but then how do you take that data and apply it to the actual play that took place? It just seems like it's a very sloppy process, and I'm not exactly sure how much you can gain from it. To your point, what type of an advantage are you really gaining from it that you're not going to gain from watching it, watching the all 22, watching something on TV? Like, I'm not sure. And in fact, we know for sure, we're talking about things that are speculation, rumor, whatever. We know for sure that the NCAA questioned it because they actually made a motion to try to get rid of this rule not too long ago. Now it was voted down and kept on the books, but basically the NCAA said that the competitive advantage you gain by doing this is minimal.
Yeah.
Especially when compared to the cost of oversight.
On the flip side of the coin, if I'm going to be devil's advocate and kind of take a look at Michigan and what they're doing in Connor Stallions, that my question would then be, and that was one of my other, then why do it? Like, why even do this? Like, if you want to challenge it from this standpoint and go at Connor and go at Michigan and go at that approach, like, we've said this from the beginning, they're good enough to not even need an extra advantage. Exhibit A, 49 to freaking nothing in East Lansing, right? I just find myself having so many questions with all of this. Part of it because I don't get why you'd really do it. Another reason because the joke or the rule is kind of a joke in the first place. Another reason is because I don't really understand why, how much help you get from approaching it in person with a cell phone recording versus the all 22 tape. Another angle being it just doesn't really make any sense to need. I don't know. I just find myself asking like a billion questions every day, and that's beyond all the stuff out there that's been written by people who clearly were wrong about what they were saying. The media, the journalists. It's just been like it's been a circus. It really has been a circus to try to keep up with it and make sense of everything that they're doing.
It has been. It's been an absolute clown show. And here's where I land on it, because you and I have done a couple of shows now, a few shows since this all came to light. And I think just like everybody else out there who's tried to process it, you kind of go up and down a little bit. You hear something, you're like, oh shit, this isn't good. And then you let it marinate for a bit and you're like, okay, well, how bad is it? And then you hear something else that drops. And that's part of the deal is every single day there's been a steady leak of things that aren't so good for Michigan. But then when you think about it, digest it, understand a little bit more about what's going on, I still come back to a place where I feel like I think a lot of the people that are looking forward to a big punishment for Michigan are going to be extremely disappointed. And here's where I land on this. Either Michigan and Connor Stallions was incredibly brilliant in how they did this whole thing, or incredibly stupid. You have pictures of guys on the sidelines very clearly holding laminated sheets with,
silhouette bodies on it.
Silhouette bodies and signals. So you have Connor Stallions putting his name on the ticket purchases. You have Venmo receipts that people can look at, which are public information. To do all that, and I go back to what I said before, for him, the background he had, how meticulous he reportedly was in this plan and deciphering all these signals, to also be so stupid and naive in a critical part of this whole plan, to me, almost makes less sense than they knew what they were doing. They knew they were exploiting something. And if the NCAA ever caught on, they would have an excuse. Now, did they ever think some independent investigative firm was going to go to the NCAA and rat them out? Probably not. But that's what ultimately happened. So, again, we're going to have to see how all this plays out. But anybody out there, whether you're on Michigan's side, whether you're on a rival side, you're an Ohio State fan, you're a Spartan fan, you're part of the national media, anybody that claims to know exactly where this is headed, they're just not working with accurate information. They're telling you what they hope. I'm guilty of it. I personally believe nothing will come of it. Fuck, Connor Stallions may remain on staff. There's a chance that he comes back to Michigan.
Still getting paid as of right now.
Yeah. And if it turns out that what he did wasn't against technically any rule, why the hell would Michigan fire him? And I've said this before. If Michigan does opt to fire him, to me, the optics of it are you're admitting guilt. He did something wrong.
Yeah, it is an interesting way to look at it. They were either so brilliant when it came to looking at the rules and the bylaws that they just said, we're doing this and we're doing it outwardly because we're not doing anything wrong. To your point, Connor Stallions appearing to talk directly into the ears of the coordinators a lot. Now, I do think that the Ross Dellinger photos were hilarious, and he's not. But there's now been video clips of Connor literally talking into the ear of Jesse Minter, and then Minter making a call. Like I get it. Like I see that. That's not that abnormal. Just with everything else that's coming out now, you're like, okay, well, maybe there's a little something to that. Every staff's got people on the sidelines telling the coaches stuff they're supposed. Dude, I mean, like, Jesse Minter, he's got a background with linebackers, and maybe Connor Stallions. He could be telling him like very specific linebacker coverages based on the personnel. I mean, we don't know what he's saying.
He could be telling him what he saw on TV. He could be telling him what he saw. You know what I mean? Like
having
video footage of him whispering in somebody's ear is not evidence of anything.
No, it's not. It's not at all. Having analysts tell the assistant coaches exactly what you have spotters. The other team's top corner's not in, or they're playing press man, they're bump and run, they're outside leverage, inside leverage, 8 yards off, 10 yards off, 12 yards off, 22 personnel, 12, 30, like they do that shit all game long, all positions, all coaches. Having assistants and analysts behind coaches telling the on-field position guys what's going on is a part of every single snap. That's not weird to show that. Yes, when you've got Connor's name attached to buying tickets and now his name's being dragged through the mud, and you cherry pick one little clip of him talking to Minter, and then people want to spin it in to be like, see, there's the wind talker there breaking down the code of the bucket. Like, shut the hell up. You don't know football. You don't need to speak on it. That's what I feel like saying to some of those people. At the same time, if they didn't know that they were breaking rules, I just, like you said, you're either super brilliant and knew that what you were doing was fine and do all the stuff I just talked about, Connor talking in the ear, breaking down codes, laminated play calling sheets, week in, week out, advantages over the other team, or you're super dumb. And I just don't know how you could make such an egregious error by putting your name on stuff and doing all these things that you shouldn't have been doing. It just seems weird that it's one or the other, but it feels like it is at this point.
And I feel like another aspect of it that kind of lends credibility to that thought is, and Jim Harbaugh reiterated it today during his press conference, that he was very forthright, stood by everything he put out in his initial statement, and there was no room for speculation in what he said. It was flat out, I didn't know about it, didn't instruct my anybody on my staff to do anything illegal, which again, like, if they weren't doing anything illegal, then I, as somebody who loves the University of Michigan football program, I do have a hard time believing that Jim Harbaugh didn't know what Connor Stallions was doing to a certain extent, right? I would think he would have to know a little bit about this guy since he's so involved on the sidelines, very vocal, talking to Jesse Minter, talking to various people. But you would also have to believe that if Jim Harbaugh was guilty of something, that this guy has now lied directly multiple times publicly, which I think that's just as much of a stretch as anything else I've heard out there.
Yeah. I'd be interested to see, actually, I bet, because Michigan has an army of analysts and, grad assistants and guys who work hand in hand with the different position coaches. I bet if you locked a camera onto any one of them during the course of the game, they're doing the same thing. Like, so that those video clips of Connor talking to coaches, I just feel like have been blown way out of proportion. Like I said, going back to the Ross Dellinger Bigfoot photos, like, there he is. Yeah, he's on the paid staff, you dummy. He's going to be out there every single week. We see him every week.
Let me ask you, Brandon,
last week, but
as you sit there right now, is it illegal to pay somebody, a civilian, to go to a football game and record what they see?
I don't believe so. Not the way that it's written in the bylaws. No.
I don't either. So what are we doing?
Yeah, I mean, it was actually, I think it was, I can't remember, somebody texted it to me and sent it to me, but it was on an Ohio State message board, premium message board, and very detailed, broken down.
A Buckeye fan who shared it and was like, look, like, and there was somebody else that shared it. And again, you're getting random things spit out there, but from what I've seen from the NCAA bylaws, there is nothing specific about what Connor Stallions is accused of doing that was against NCAA bylaws. Now you can draw a line to say, well, you can't do in-person recruiting for future opponents. Well, yes, you can't do in-person recruiting. You can't be there in person, but it doesn't really specify what exactly he's being accused of. And so at this point, I think you could take a look at it and say, I'm not even so sure that anything that was done was illegal, which could be a big part of what the NCAA is looking at. What happened? Did it go against any of our regulations? And what do we do about it? Like, is this something that we want to allow to continue? Is this rule even worth keeping in the first place? Do we need to put transmission in the helmets moving forward to eliminate all of this bullshit so that we don't have these clowns on the sideline holding up pictures of cowboy hats and holding up pictures of R. Kelly or whatever the hell it is? Like, it's a very easy solution. But at the end of the day, to think that the NCAA investigation is solely to get Jim Harbaugh and to slam a punishment on this program, it might just be to gain a better understanding of what was going on, what information they had, and then what do you do from a rule standpoint moving forward to make sure that it doesn't happen again? Or do you just say, you know what, like, it's not a big fucking deal.
Yeah.
Like, there's no reason for us to regulate this at this point, because as it's been said many times, in the social media age, with everybody nobody's showing up with like an RCA shoulder camcorder to these games and zooming in. Everybody's recording everything at sporting events. It's nearly impossible to stop it from happening. Upload it to social media. Dave Portnoy from Barstool Sports spent a good portion of the game at Wisconsin zooming in on the Ohio State sideline, looking at the signals, and then posting it to his social media account that has like 5 million followers.
Saying this is not against the rules.
Is it illegal what he did? Can Connor Stallions then go onto that Twitter page, look at it, try to decipher it, and then apply it to Michigan's game plan? Is that illegal? Not to my knowledge.
Not, and that's another point. This rule, I think it's been amended, right? But this rule came out in 1994. No cell phone cameras. You had to have a big old RCA rig back then if you were going to record something. So the rule itself is like, it's antiquated at this point and doesn't really apply to the way that people gather information and how every single stadium looks every single weekend with thousands of people holding up their phones, recording whatever the hell they want. There's no rule against that. You're not going to be able to enforce a rule like that. Yes. And then if it's uploaded to a public place, you can do a lot of different things with it. I just wanted to read a couple key points. I found that thread from a 24/7, I believe 24/7 Ohio State site. Much has been made about the alleged recording of opponents' signals during this in-person scouting, but that's not against any regulations written in the bylaws. It's only an in-game rule for the teams that are participating in the contest, which is outlined and defined in the NCAA rulebook entirely, which is entirely separate from the bylaws that we're dealing with when it comes to Michigan right here. And there's a lot of this made too. The conduct and the employment of athletics personnel, which none of these people reportedly that went to these games have anything to do with Michigan when it comes to payroll or anything like that. So they're not employees of the university. They're not institutional staff is the term that's used a ton throughout those bylaws. Clearly written for specific employed athletics personnel and institutional staff that you can't do it, but those people again aren't institutional staff.
Yeah, but here's the other thing, Brandon. Who paid for it? Who financed it? Everybody's acting like they're aware that just because Connor Stallions was on a $55,000 a year salary, that they know what is going on with his finances. I don't know what kind of upbringing he had. I don't know what's in his bank account. I don't know what kind of savings he has. I don't know what other deals he has going on. So again, to somehow chalk it up to like, how can a guy making $55,000 a year, ever afford something like this? Well, you don't know what's going on with his finances. So again, It's another way of taking a pretty big leap to say he only makes X amount working for Michigan. There's no way he could afford that.
This was pretty interesting. It says that there is a prohibition of advanced scouting. Basketball, football, volleyball were prohibited from in-person scouting with a few exceptions. You can actually pay for an in-person scouting service to go to the games and pay and scout for you, which was effective as of August 2013 and still reads that same way. So again, the 1994 rule, which has been amended a little bit, much different in 2013 with the way technology is and all that stuff. So, again, going back to should get the death penalty. Well, they may not have literally even broken a rule. Not one.
Yeah, but Brandon, I read it on online articles that the ball boys may have been involved. Like, what are we doing? Your point and the point that I've been trying to make is exactly that. We don't even know, based on what we're seeing in the bylaws, did Connor Stallions even break a rule? And as of tonight, Monday at what is it, 7:30, 7:40, almost 8 o'clock, Connor Stallions is still employed by the University of Michigan, still being paid by the University of Michigan. So do with that what you want.
Like, you could grab any one of these people who have an axe to grind against Michigan, Spartan Radio. They want the program to crumble and burn to the ground. There's no win in it for them. They keep saying no win. Why would we want that? Shut the hell up. The Ohio State people saying they should get the death penalty. These different national analysts, which they may not have actually anything personally against.
Editor-in-chief for The Athletic, which I thought was like
There's
a
another
reputable publication.
If you could take all of them and sit them in chairs next to each other and ask them directly, name one rule that Michigan has absolutely unequivocally broken, there isn't one. There isn't one. There's some smoke. There's some things that don't look awesome, that might not be on the up and up, but it might just be just legal enough with a couple loopholes and doing it this way and doing it this way that make it completely legal and within the rules of competition as we see it right now.
Isn't that what it's all about, Brandon?
It is. I mean, dude,
that extra inch, whatever you can get, if you can do it within the rules, even if you got to stretch and bend a little bit, that's what every elite college football program is doing.
Like I said, find the rule and tell me exactly which rule they broke without question. You can't. Not yet, anyway. Not yet, anyway. And I don't know if you're ever going to be able to, because if so far the things that have been talked about, it's fine.
Can you imagine the meltdown that's going to occur when and if nothing comes of this, other than a clarification of the rule moving forward? And we could very well be headed there. And yes, I've seen it in the comments here, and I've seen it on social media a little bit tonight, expecting some big good news to be coming out of Ann Arbor tomorrow. Again, I don't know how much stock to put in. I've seen it float around. We'll see what happens. I think one thing we can count on is there will be some news, whether it's Pete Thamel, whether it's The Athletic, whether it's, whoever it is, there is going to be Michigan news tomorrow. You can almost count on it, like clockwork.
Yeah, you want to talk about a damn crime, Tony? That's a crime. Roman Wilson being left off the Biletnikoff award list is a
very
crime.
much so a crime. Very much so a crime.
That's a crime. There's 63 wide receivers in the country doing better work than Roman Wilson right now.
Interesting.
Ridiculous. That is a ridiculous omission. I can't even. I remember I saw that come across social media. I was like, what? How the hell did they come to that list? Wow. Anyway, that's a bigger crime. that's a much bigger
that
crime.
Warrants more investigation,
yes,
as far as I'm concerned.
Let's put a firm on that bullshit right there. Biletnikoff. That award has lost.
What are the other people saying out there?
Yeah, I mean, 15 miles an hour has popped up a couple of times. I
think
I busted a couple sprints lately here. Dude, I had a calf cramp last night that would put down a stallion. Bro, It was the most locked up calf cramp I've ever had in my life. It may keep me from running for a while. That's how bad it hurt.
You see where this is headed, folks?
Hey, I'm just keeping it real. Sometimes keeping it real goes wrong.
Sometimes
it keeps you from running 15 miles an hour. Yeah, let's see what else we got here. Mustard packets by the bed. Just eating mustard and drinking pickle juice to try to get to 15 miles an hour. That's what we're all about right now. Yeah, houseplants and field corn. That's a Harbaugh-ism that I mean, he continually tops himself, I feel like. With
You know what I felt like the best part about that quote was, and look, I like Isaiah Hole, good guy. Like I've gotten a chance to get to know him, very surface level though, but we sit next to each other at a couple of away games, and
he bailed us the hell out. Yeah.
Big time bailout when we were stranded at the Illinois-Iowa border. But one of the funniest parts about it, and if you go back and you read it, or you listen to the audio from that, Harbaugh was done with his sort of field corn houseplant thing, then pivoted to a question from Isaiah, and then stared at Isaiah for maybe 2 or 3 seconds. And while Isaiah was in the middle of the question, Harbaugh went back and did a 5-minute elaboration on houseplants and corn. It was phenomenal. So, I mean, there were people I had posted a couple videos, and it was mostly Ohio State slappies that were responding to it. Look at the body language. This is a guy who looks like he's guilty. Look at him squirming. Look at him this. Look at him that. Newsflash. He looks like that for every single press conference. You can tell he doesn't want to be there. He doesn't enjoy talking to the media. And if he doesn't want to answer a question, he's not going to answer it. So there was nothing different from him today, body language, that would that would indicate he was nervous or worried that something was coming. This is how he is in press conferences.
And when you're that, I don't know if he's ever got me with one of those where he looks at you, you finish your whole question, then he goes back to he does that a lot. He'll you think he's done, and then he does it to Dave. Dave Abloff is his right-hand man. While Dave is introducing the next question asker, Harbaugh will just blurt out and interrupt Dave, and then Dave just has to be he just buttons it up there. It's well, yeah, fuck me, you got me again. It happens a lot.
Yeah.
And when you're that guy, I don't know, pick one of the emojis and make that face, because that's really all you can do. And Harbaugh,
Isaiah was 30 words into his question, and before Harbaugh just turned back and was the thing about field corn is if you throw a seed in the crack of the sidewalk, it'll find a way.
That's hilarious, man. Yeah, he definitely has a way of bringing things to painting a picture. He has a way of painting a picture that I don't always follow, but yeah, the field corn houseplant one was interesting. I mean, he talked about William Wallace, I think, also today, didn't he? Or was that?
Yep. And I think the overall picture he was trying to paint there, and he repeated it multiple times, was a one-track mind, singular focus. I'm not doing my job as a head coach if I'm not locked into what's happening with Purdue this weekend. And I feel some of his coach speak, but I think for Jim Harbaugh in particular, the guys on the football team, I think Roman Wilson backed that up tonight, that look, we're focused on the task at hand. We're focused on Purdue. We're focused on getting to where we want to be. All of their goals are still on the table. And I think something like this, if you're a young team, an inexperienced team, if you lack leadership, this type of thing can sort of throw a wrench into that momentum you have. That's not the University of Michigan football program right now. This is a team with an NFL offensive line. This is a team with a quarterback who is a legit Heisman Trophy candidate. Blake Corum in the backfield, arguably the best defense in the country. Veteran talent everywhere, captains everywhere. Even if they're not a captain in name, they've been with the program. They're leaders here. I have zero doubts come Saturday night, you're going to see something similar to what you saw in East Lansing, and that's going to be an angry Michigan football team that's looking to make a statement.
That was another thing I thought of once upon a time. It took 7 weeks to get Donovan Edwards into the end zone, averaging a yard a carry with all these advantages and all the sign stealing and knowing the exact right play to call on every snap. Come on, man. I don't know. Anyway, all right. That's another specific. That's a random one. I do understand, and very specific point. Thank you, the Michigan man, for saying hi to your mom for $2. Appreciate that. Yeah, that's about it there. We're at an hour and 3 minutes. I know the Lions are on. My dad just said time to get off the pod. Go watch the Lions. Lions, Monday Night Football back in Detroit playing against the Raiders. Yeah, I don't know if anybody out there saw Chase Young mentioned among the potential trade targets for the Detroit Lions. Chase Young, Aiden Hutchinson off the edges. Chris, what do you think about that?
That would be an interesting combo. I will say, and I know that they have to wear it with the new helmets, but I am not a fan of the all gray alternate. I just think it's very it's It's boring. I would rather see that lid, that helmet on an all blue uni. I guess because of because of NFL regulations or rules, they're not allowed to do it that way. So whatever the case
Really?
is. Yeah, I'm not a fan of the all gray. I think they're specifically prohibited from the color helmet matching, something to do with the color helmet matching the rest of the uniform. I think it has to be.
I wonder because the Bengals have an all white, but I wonder if they get away with it because they have the black stripes. So it's not like, you know what I'm saying? Like it's not all white. I don't know.
Yeah.
Because I thought an all white Lions, alternate would be super crispy. Or if you wore the blue with the blue, like it would look much better. Interesting. I didn't know that. They just changed up the whole alternate helmet thing, even being a thing in the NFL, which is crazy to me. But anyway. Well, there you have it. There you have it for a Monday show. Wednesday, we'll be back. We'll transition. We will, obviously different things are going to continue to come this week with the sign stealing, with Connor Stallions, with Harbaugh. Like, we'll get a chance to talk to players again.
Could be some big good news coming tomorrow, though. We'll
Sounds
see.
like there's some possibilities out there, but I'm sure we will transition a bit into getting more into our normal stuff this week. We'll do some prediction stuff. We'll talk about Purdue. And look, I am excited to get Michigan back on the field and watch them play some football and beat the shit out of another team, because I believe they're favored by 30 plus again. Purdue just got beat by Nebraska. They're 2-6, what do we find, Chris? 2-6, I think, right? They're in last in the West.
I mean, they're tied for last in the West, that tells you everything you need to know.
If you're last in the West,
they're right down there with Michigan State. So
well, Michigan State got beat up by the old Fighting PJs this weekend, which was that's a shame.
Sure did.
All right, folks. Have a good one. Have a good rest of the week. We will see you on Wednesday. I mean, it is fan-led Wednesday. It'll feel probably a lot like tonight. We can continue to talk about this. Bring the rest of your questions, whatever you want us to address. We'll be back 7 o'clock Wednesday night.
Appreciate y'all.